Greetings, my spine-tingling spectators. It's me, Papa Bones, back with another episode to send shivers down your spine and bring your nightmares to life. Tonight I've got something extra special that'll make you think twice before flicking off that light switch. Prepare yourself for the top 3 creepypastas that'll make you afraid of the dark. Are you ready for the internet's most terrifying tales and sinister stories? If you are, then grab your blanket, snuggle up with your favorite ghoul, and let's embark on this chilling journey into the shadowy corners of your mind. But remember, my dearest viewers, once you hear these tales, there's no going back.
Think back to when you were a child. You probably had some silly thing you were afraid of. Some ridiculous, imaginary boogeyman that haunted your nightmares. But you grew out of it, and soon enough you didn't need a nightlight to chase away the monster anymore. Except, sometimes, that boogeyman isn't imaginary. I know mine wasn't.
If you were dreaming right now, how would you know it? Would things look different? Feel different? Smell different? I mean, if it was my dream, there'd be way more horror babes around. But even if I was dreaming, and there were horror babes around, would it really matter? After all, dreams are fake. Right?
It all started when I was 4 or 5. My parents and I lived in this old house in a small town. I didn't really have many friends in the area, so naturally, I spent most of my free time exploring the house and playing little make-believe games by myself. There was one part of the house I refused to go in though. The basement. For whatever reason, I was convinced that there was something living down there. And it would get me if I ventured down there. I wasn't as wrong as you'd think. Now, before I go any further, I will admit that I was a bit of a coward as a kid, so nightmares were a fairly regular occurrence. But most of the time, I could tell that I was dreaming, so I didn't make too much of them. These dreams that I'm going to tell you about were different. They felt absolutely real. And given what happened, they very well might have been. Like I said, I was just a little tyke when I started dreaming about the old man. I still remember every little detail, even today. Especially today, in fact. I remember, in the first dream, it was a beautiful summer day, and I was out and about, riding my bike in the driveway, and generally not having a care in the world. My parents were outside, watching me, and as far as I cared, everything was perfect as it could be. Suddenly, I felt an icy wind blow over me, and my bike just sort of locked up. I began rolling, slowly, backwards along the driveway. I was unable to slow the bike down, or even get off it. I began looking around in a panic, trying to see what was going on. That's when I saw him for the first time. The old man. He was dressed sharply, like an old-fashioned nobleman. He was tall and odd. His skin was pale. He had these terrifying eyes, and a disturbing smile. Being so young, I was unable to articulate exactly what I saw when I looked into the cold, dead eyes of what we came to call the Dream Man. Even as a grown man, I still can't. What I saw was simply too alien, too inhuman. Some thing's poor attempt at feigning humanity. I didn't waste any time. As soon as I saw that horrible thing, I tried to run. But I still couldn't even manage to get off my bicycle. I turned to scream for my parents, only to find they weren't there anymore. Not that they could have done anything anyways. I slid backwards, right into the arms of the old man, his horrible eyes staring at me. I felt a freezing numbness as his long bony fingers grasped my arm, his dirty claw-like nails digging into my flesh. I remember how the old man leaned in close, breaking away from his bizarre smile just long enough to whisper one word to me. Cellar. The next thing I knew, I was being shaken awake by my parents, as I had actually been screaming in my sleep. I told them about what happened, and they told me it was just a nightmare. I believed them. Every so often, I would have nightmares about the man, but since they were only dreams, my parents didn't think much of them. That is, until I started sleepwalking. As bad as my first encounter with the Dream Man was, the worst had yet to come. The Dream Man was always the same. It always started off with me in my room, playing, when I would suddenly get a sense of wrongness about my surroundings. An urgency I couldn't shake. I would go off to find my parents, but no matter where I looked, I couldn't find them. When I would go to the hallway where the door to the basement was, I would hear someone calling me. When I would turn around to see where the sound came from, the basement door would swing open, and there would be the old man beckoning me, calling me without moving his lips, locked onto me with his unblinking stare. I was powerless. I could do nothing but march towards him, screaming silently in my mind as my limbs jerkily dragged me along against my will. A prisoner to my own body. Usually at this point, I'd be woken up by my parents. Somehow, I would sleepwalk all the way to the cellar door. They almost always caught me before I started to go down the stairs, but not always. One time, the old man managed to get me down to the basement. That's the only nightmare about the Dream Man that I don't entirely remember. I just remember that I was in the basement with him, and he gripped my leg in his icy dead grip, that vile grin on his face. I woke up in excruciating pain. Apparently while sleepwalking, I fell down the stairs into the basement, breaking my leg in the process. After I got out of the hospital, my parents took me to see a psychologist who thought the nightmares and sleepwalking were stress-induced, stating my parents' constant arguing was probably to blame. But, just in case, I was prescribed a medication to help me sleep. Naturally, after what happened, sleep was the last thing I wanted to do, and being a little kid, I tried to stay awake forever. Obviously, this didn't work, but strangely enough, the nightmares sort of subsided. I mean, sure, the old man would regularly show up in my dream, terrifying me into consciousness, but he never forced me down to the basement again. So time passed, and a few years later, I was in 3rd grade, and had even managed to make a friend. Mike. Mike and I were more like brothers than anything else. We were two of a kind, inseparable. As similar as we were, we had one major difference. Mike was completely fearless, whereas I was absolutely terrified of two specific things: the Dream Man and the basement I'd come to associate with him. One day my parents gave in and allowed Mike to spend the weekend with us. We had a great time, playing video games, telling spooky stories. We even snuck into my dad's secret horror movie stash. But eventually, after all the spooky stuff we had seen and done, Mike suggested that we up the ante. We were going to go down to the basement to confront my fears. I begged Mike. I pleaded with him not to make me go down there. But he saw it as his duty as my best friend to break me free of this fear. And when Mike got an idea in his head, there was no dissuading him of it. I wish I could say what happened next was only a nightmare. It was just after midnight. We crept down the stairs into the basement, armed with flashlights and, in my case, a wiffle ball bat. We spent about half an hour down there, looking in every corner for the aged ghoul who had haunted my dreams for so long. With no success, Mike smiled at me and told me I didn't have to be afraid anymore, and we decided to go back upstairs. That's when everything went to hell. Standing there in the doorway was the dream man, every bit as horrifying as he had been in my dreams. In one swift motion, he clamped his gnarled hands around my shoulder, and with one determined motion lifted me off the ground so we were eye to eye. Those nightmarish eyes of his filled my vision. I heard screaming, but I couldn't tell if it was coming from me or from Mike. I don't remember what happened after that. The next thing I knew, I was waking up on the cold, hard floor, and Mike was huddled in the corner shuddering, wide-eyed and pale, clutching the bat to his chest. For some time afterwards, I continuously asked him what happened, but he always refused to tell me. As time passed, we grew distant, as friends often do, and as Mike became more and more withdrawn, I always blamed myself. Whatever happened to us in that basement had changed him, and it was all my fault. Eventually, I stopped dreaming about the old man, and I managed to put the whole thing behind me. I went to college, met a great girl. We've been married now for 10 years, and everything's pretty great. Like I said, I managed to move on, and nearly managed to forget about the dream man. Until this morning, that is. At breakfast, my son told my wife and I about a dream he had last night. A dream about an old man in the basement, an old man with cold hands and terrifying eyes.
And they all lived happily ever after. The end. What a great story. Hey, do you guys know what else is great? Reading this week's top comment. Please remember to like and comment, even just to say hi. I read every comment and it really helps the channel. Okay. Ooh. This week's top commenter is Frontal Lobe. Frontal Lobe wrote, I had an encounter with a UFO, but mine was a big black rectangle. Cool story if you're interested in hearing it. It was a great story, and there's a pretty good chance it'll be animated one day, so make sure you guys are telling me all of your strange, creepy, and paranormal stories. Until next week, sweet dreams!
The room was dark and empty, a spare room that I hadn't had the chance to do anything with. The electricity had gone out sometime earlier that night, so I had no way to tell the time and no source of light, except for the flashlight in my hand, my lighter, and the candle I had brought just in case. I was sitting with my back in the far corner of the room, flashlight pointed straight at the door on the other side. The light danced on the wall across from me as my hand shook, terrified, although I had no idea what had been stalking me that day.
Have you ever had the feeling you were being watched? Even though you were sure you were alone, you just couldn't shake the feeling. Well, that feeling is usually Mark Zuckerberg. We all get watched from time to time, while out shopping, walking, or driving. But we like to think we're safe once we're inside our homes. And we usually are. Usually.
I didn't have a car, so I biked, carrying groceries in 2 plastic bags in a crate hooked up to the back of my bike. When I got home, I noticed that I was missing a bag of groceries. It must have fallen off when I was riding home. Thinking it nothing more than unfortunate luck, I picked up the one bag and headed inside. After all, I could do without canned goods for a few days. I opened the door and almost immediately tripped on something piled up in front of the door, just inside the house. The groceries from the bag I was holding flew into the air and scattered as they hit the ground. When I looked back to see what I tripped on, there was a sloppy pile of canned food. Since I never locked my door, I simply dismissed it as a Good Samaritan act from a neighbor that perhaps was too busy to stop and chat. I picked up all the food and stowed it away in the kitchen. It was getting late. so I headed upstairs to my bedroom, got a book, flipped the switch on the bedside lamp, and entrenched myself in a good story. As the night went on, I started to hear weird noises coming from downstairs in the kitchen. I told myself it was just my imagination, because every time I would notice the sounds, they would stop. And when I went back to the story, they would pick up again. My imagination would do that to me from time to time. Before I was able to finish my chapter, the lamplight flickered out. I put my book down, still open to save my spot, and I went to turn on the main light. Unfortunately, it didn't come on either. The power was out. As I prepared to reset the circuit breaker, the noises from downstairs started again. It sounded like someone rummaging around in my kitchen. I grabbed a flashlight from the nightstand drawer, a bat from beneath the bed, and headed downstairs, the creaking steps giving away my position. When I got to the kitchen, the noises stopped. Bat ready, I pointed my flashlight all around to see where the intruder was, but saw no one. What I did see was the canned food I'd recently put away was stacked neatly in a pyramid just beneath the kitchen table. I swallowed hard, thinking someone must be playing some prank or some sick twisted game. Slowly I crept towards the table, feet wet from milk that had spilled on the floor. When I got closer to the table, I could hear breathing coming from beneath it. I stooped down to look, but saw nothing. Slowly I reached out to touch the pyramid of cans. As my hands made contact, the cans scattered. It was as if something burst through them, scattering them in all directions. I fell back on the soaked floor and dropped the flashlight. As I frantically grasped for the flashlight, I heard the sound of feet splashing through the puddles on the floor and running out of my kitchen. I got up and slowly followed the footprints made from the spilt milk. What struck me as odd was that they weren't human footprints. They were the same width and length, but the toes were much longer, almost as long as fingers. I followed them to the front door, where they disappeared. I relaxed a little, just thankful that whatever it was gone, but I didn't loosen my grip on the bat. Slowly I walked backwards towards the stairs again, planning on locking myself up in my room and waiting till morning. As I did, it sounded like something wet hit the wooden floor in front of me. I pointed my flashlight down at the floor and my heart stopped. There was a new footprint. This one pointed at me. I took another step back and heard another wet slap. Another footprint. I turned and ran, tripping up the stairs but making it up to my room. I slammed the door shut and locked it and pushed the bed up against it, knocking my book down in the process. I set the bat down on the bed for a second and grabbed the lighter and candle out of my nightstand, just in case. That's when I heard the first creak. Whatever it was mounting the first step in the staircase. Frantically, I ran to the opposite side of the room, where there was a door that led to a spare room. Upon hearing the second step creak, I threw open the door, which didn't have a lock, ran inside, and headed to the far corner. I sat there quietly, breathing heavily, heart pounding in my ears. I realized that I left my bat on the bed, but was convinced by the creaking of the third and fourth step that it wasn't worth going to get it. I sat there, counting the steps as they creaked. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It was getting closer. My hand shook as a tear ran down my cheek. What was going on? That's 15. I tried to control my breathing. After all, I was trying not to be found. My heart pounded louder, sweat flattened my hair to my head, and the shaking became worse. My knuckles were white as I clenched the flashlight, whose beam was now dancing all over the wall, rarely even landing on the door. It had reached the second floor. Slowly the footsteps got closer as it approached my room. I heard the lock turn and the door creak open. The bed scraped across the floor. I heard the bat rattle against the wood as it fell off the bed. And still, the footsteps continued. Pages turned as whatever it was picked up the book that I was reading and started to look through it. Then came a thud as it dropped it. It began to rummage through my drawers and my sheets as if looking for something. Then everything went still and quiet. The silence was only broken by my heavy breathing and the pounding of my heart. It stayed like this for a few minutes. Then the footsteps continued. It was getting closer to the spare room. The door slowly creaked open. Lingering ajar momentarily. My heart was ready to leap out of my chest. My mouth was dry, and sweat stuck my clothes to my skin. This was it, I thought. As I waited for something to come into the room, nothing happened. Again came the excruciating silence, this time lasting for what felt like hours. Nothing happened, and I was starting to believe that whatever it was had lost interest and left. Still, I sat in my corner, flashlight trained on the door opposite me. I slowly returned to a calmer state of mind. After God knows how long, my flashlight flickered out, leaving me in complete darkness. Frantically, I reached for the lighter and flicked it on. My gaze shot towards the door. Still nothing. I looked around the room. Nothing. Slowly, I got up and crossed the room to the door. I closed it and sat with my back against it, just in case. Still, the silence reigned. Finally, I let out a sigh of relief. It was gone. I went to flip the light switch, but still the power was out. So I lit the candle instead. And that's when I became aware of something standing in the opposite corner of the room. My heart froze in my chest, and my lungs refused to work. It couldn't have been there before. I was just in that corner, but it was there, now. In a frenzy to get up and run, I knocked over the candle and it went out. I gripped the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. It was stuck, locked inside with God knows what. I searched the floor for the lighter and flicked it on. I looked around, but the being was gone. Again, I was alone. Breathing heavily, I found the candle, all the while keeping my gaze on that far corner where it had been just moments earlier. Once I brought the lighter to the wick, and life was breathed into the candle, it reappeared. The candle gave it away. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But its feet, flat, long, and bony, those are the feet that would leave the tracks downstairs. Its body was built the same way, abnormally skinny, just skin wrapped with bone. And it was short too, like a child. Its knobbly arms were just long enough that its long, skinny fingers could reach the ground as it stood straight up. Its clothing looked like ancient rags. It was bald, pale, and had no ears or nose that I could see. The mouth was thin and lacked proportion, much like the rest of its body. And the eyes were round and lifeless, black orbs that simply reflected the candlelight. As I stared at its eyes, they seemed to calm me. My heart rate slowed, my breathing steadied, and the urge to run faded away. Something about its eyes kept me gazing into them, unable to move, not wanting to, even if I could. I could feel its gaze drawing me in, as I was overcome with the feeling that I belonged with it. It stepped forward, slowly putting one foot in front of the other, dragging its fingers across the ground, It came right up next to me, its gaze never leaving mine as I stared down at it and it up at me. It slowly raised one arm, holding out its long, thin hand. Its fingers were about twice the size as mine, and I knew normally this would be something to be afraid of. But as I gazed into the light reflected off its eyes, I began to forget my name, my past, and myself. I took its hand, and it took the candle from me. It started leading me out the door, down the stairs, and out into the yard. Together, we walked up to the edge of the forest, the candle lighting our path. I stopped at the edge of the woods and looked back at my home. Even though the creature hardly moved, I could feel it tugging me, urging me to continue. I looked into its eyes, and all of the worries were gone. We took one step into the woods, and I watched as the creature blew out the candle.
Well, now you all know the secret of the candle walker. He goes into your house, throws your stuff around, spills milk all over the place, and then disappears you. It sounds like he works for the US government. Until next time, try to keep things light. When I was young, I was terrified of the dark. Every night when the lights would go out, I would feel bugs crawling on my face. So one night, I waited. And when I felt the bugs, I quickly turned on my flashlight. That was the night I learned the dark could be way less scary than the light. Turns out the whole time it was my mom's mustache, touching me when she kissed my cheek. Lucky for you guys, she's not in this Halloween special. But trust me, it will still chill you to the bone.
Coming out tonight? It's Halloween. Saturday and a blue moon all at once.
Yeah, I know. But what would I even wear?
I just don't understand why this wasn't done already.
Colin, please.
I've been here a week. You're telling me this whole time they couldn't have gotten this paperwork done?
Actually, I could not. I can't fill out the discharge paperwork before you're authorized to be discharged.
I'm sorry, Dr. Bridgman. He isn't normally like this.
It's quite all right. I am here to help you people, but people prefer being home. It's your home with your things. And since Colin here is no threat to himself or others, home is exactly where he belongs.
Always on a full moon.
Tracy, radio security and tell them to start making their way up staircase D and wait outside until we open the door. When we lose power, it resets the electronics used in the exit door locks on this floor. It's done to try to prevent people from trying to get out during a power outage.
You mean I'm gonna be stuck here even longer?
This won't take long. When the power goes out, the lock defaults to a regular key, the same as any other door. Take the keys and meet security, and see if you can calm down the patients. What's happened?
Someone pulled Sam. Someone pulled Sam. Someone pulled Sam.
I'll try the emergency channel. This is Dr. Bridgman. We have a 1029H code 2 on the 6th floor. Do you copy?
Hey, you can't keep me here.
Colin, something is
Hello.
wrong.
This is Dr.
You're damn
Bridgman.
right something's wrong.
We have a
You signed me out.
1029H code
I get
2
to
on the
leave,
6th
and
floor.
now
Do
these
you
guys are
copy?
saying I can't go.
Colin! Even if I let you out of this room, there were only 2 keys to this floor's exit doors. We need to wait for security to respond. We will get their attention. Tell them that someone is on the loose, possibly someone dangerous. They will lock down the hospital and do a floor-by-floor sweep. Once the building is clear, you can go home.
Oh my God.
People are getting dragged into the dark. I was in my car when the lights went out. My brother and I heard screaming, so he got out of the car and he got dragged away. You have to stay in the light. Like whatever you do, stay in the light.
This is Dr. Bridgman. We have a 1029H code 2 on the 6th floor. Do you copy? This is Dr. Bridgman. We have a 1029H code 2
Ravina.
on the 6th floor. Do you copy?
Don't you see what's happening?
This is Dr.
They don't want
Bridgman.
me to leave.
We have a 1029H
Colin,
code 2
I
on
don't
the
think
6th
you
floor.
understand
Do
how
you copy?
serious this all is.
I'm not crazy, Ravina.
This is Dr.
You expect me to
Bridgman.
believe I should stay here because
We
there's
have
some
a
boogeyman in the dark waiting to get me? I'm gonna get that key.
Colin, don't.
This is Dr. Bridgman. Colin, you're officially not a patient of Mercy Hospital. We are not trying to deceive you. We are like strangers, trapped in an elevator. The generators in this hospital can keep these lights on for 36 hours, but by tomorrow morning, the power company will have all this sorted, and you will walk out of here and go home.
Nope. Still no. Of course no. Why would it even be yes? It's just some kind of game to them. If the dark is so strong and dangerous, why doesn't it snap a pencil? They probably have a transfer to an even worse hospital coming for me in the morning. I need to prove it to them. I need to show them I know this is bullshit. I'll turn the lights off. Wake them up in the dark, and then they'll have to let me go.
Overcome your sorrow and your pain. Life can be tough when nobody knows your name. I wish for the very best, the best that life can bring. Well, don't you forget you're my everything.
Well, my fearsome friends, we've reached the end of our petrifying plunge into the darkest stories on the internet. I hope you enjoy these top 3 creepypasta that'll make you afraid of the dark. But don't fret, these nightmares don't end here. If you dare, join me for more hair-raising adventures, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Also, click that sinister bell icon so you'll be notified when the shadows come to life again. And if you enjoyed these stories, give this video a thumbs up too, to show your appreciation for all things that go bump in the night. Before we officially dim the lights on this episode, I want to make sure you know that you are special and important. You are among the very best this world has to offer. So take good care of yourself. Otherwise, you might be left in the dark.